Did you know that St. Luke's University Health Network, based in the Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, has been recognized by the U.S. government as the highest performing health system in the United States for quality? You heard right. St. Luke's #1 recognition affirms our status as the top leader among the most respected healthcare providers in the nation, including Houston Methodist and the Mayo Clinic. To state it simply, if you want to receive the best care when you go to a hospital, come to St. Luke's.
Doug Cupo is a retired U.S. Navy captain from Naval Intelligence, a former senior U.S. Defense Intelligence officer, and interesting senior systems engineer. He has 4 decades of experience in multi-domain intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, it's known as ISR, support to joint U.S. military planning operations and assessment, with primary focus on aerospace systems development, engineering, acquisition, and operations. Mr. Cupo has been the Virginia Mutual UFO Network key researcher, lecturer, and disclosure advocate since 2021. We'll have much more on his background, but first, because of a short hour, we welcome Doug Cupo to the conversation with the Dr. Sky Experience. Thank you for being up with us this early morning. How are you, sir?
Very good. Thank you very much for having me on again.
Well, I appreciate you, and, the subject is obviously something we want to talk about, the great mysteries that are out there. And I'd like you to take us down the path here, because this is interesting. Many of the news reports, not that they're bad, we have to find out what's really behind this. And we're hearing many in the mainstream or legacy media talk about they're going to be revealing what true disclosure is, and for the government's having these secrets for 80-plus years, we're about to find out the truth. You might say just the opposite. What is the recent disclosures? And let's go into them and define them, so the people out there listening can say, wow, I didn't know this. These are all these different names. They have certain numbers and certain assessments from the government. Describe what we're talking about here in the first disclosure.
Sure, exactly. Well, we're dealing first with this new term, a new acronym that the government's come up with called PURSUE. And it stands for Presidential Unsealing and Reporting System for UAP Encounters. And, of course, UAP stand for Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena. And essentially what I'm going to go through with you today in a brief tour is not about, in this hour, wild speculation, but really about what the government is now officially releasing, a large body of unidentified aerial phenomena material. And it's important because it's not just something that's dramatic on its own accord, but because it marks a shift toward transparency and official acknowledgement of persistent unexplained cases. Some of the main points from my analysis that I'd like to share with the audience today is the majority of the items that are in this tranche, if you will, are prosaic, which really means mundane explanations. But there are unresolved ones that I'm going to go through that are exciting due to their mystical nature. And we have these limitations that I'll go through, too, about metadata and sensors. And I'll go through a couple of terms with you so the audience understands what those are about. Because
yes, but before you do that, if you don't mind, and it's my fault, not yours, of course, talk a little bit about your career without revealing national security issues. And I'm reading this from the bio that you sent. Your career was built on one thing, separating signal from noise under conditions of deep uncertainty. Now, I'll ask the question, and I may not get an answer, but could it have been something to do with submarines and detecting sonar signals or unidentified signals coming from what we might consider to be man-made submarine craft or submersible objects? Can you respond to that?
Yes, I did support the ASW area, in the specific area of ASW. And,
which is what? Anti-submarine warfare, right?
Anti-submarine warfare. And had quite a career doing that. But also, the biggest part of my career was in the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance field, where I helped design the requirements for sensor systems and platforms for space and airborne systems. So that insight gives me great insight into how these sensor systems and platforms are being used to collect against these phenomena, and so that's a key point.
And we had you on about, maybe a year ago, if I'm almost correct. We don't look the exact week and date, discussing what's still in the minds of many in the New York metropolitan area. That includes Connecticut, let's say even parts of Massachusetts, deep into Pennsylvania, down into Delaware and D.C., the mystery of these drones that were seen, some of which allegedly were the size of an SUV, and they didn't seem like a hobbyist drone. You would discuss that with us, too. That was fascinating.
Yes, exactly. And that, to me, in my mind, that has not been settled well, because there not only was, to go back historically, just it started in December of 2024, as you recall. It has not been settled because there was much more than just New Jersey. It was along the eastern seaboard, and it went out through the Midwest, and it was overseas as well. So everybody can't be imagining these things and deluding themselves into thinking that this phenomenon is there when it isn't there. Something was going on, for sure.
Absolutely. And the government release, as you describe it, official title is Pursue 1.0 UAP files. So can you give us a broad stroke of the brush? What's in there in case people are going, what is Doug Cupo talking about? Describe what's in there for people who never heard about it.
Absolutely. That's what I'm going to do next. First off, the majority of the items that are in here, the numbers that they're giving are 70 to 80% are prosaic and artifacts. And by artifacts, I mean essentially things that have to do with the sensors, peculiarities with them, that the way they operate and the way they receive this information and process it, because it could be distorting what is being collected. But 50 to 25% are legitimately unresolved. And then they figure there's a 5% that are potentially anomalous, that are doing those famous things like Lou Elizondo used to say, instantaneous acceleration, transmedium travel, fast directional changes, and things of that type. So what we have here is, in the cases that are interesting, that I'm going to go through, metallic orbs and spheres and star-like objects that have been detected. I'm going to go through some of those that have the strongest, legitimately unresolved nature to them. The kinematic claims, and I'm going to give a couple of definitions here as I go through, because they're important to understand. I'll go through those before I actually start on the cases. I won't belabor them, but the audience needs to understand some of these definitions, like metadata and kinematics and telemetry.
Yeah, help us.
Yes, I'm going to do that. So the bottom line up front is that this release advances transparency, but it's not the answer to disclosure, as we are thinking about, because there is no smoking gun per se in terms of any non-human technology that's been discovered. Unidentified in this case is not the same as anomalous. The strongest cases really cluster, though, around these recurring orb and geometric objects that have been detected, which is very significant. So when we try to separate signal from noise, and that would be in the multi-sensor area for going against these objects, and the military is obviously the best equipped to do that. The information can't be given to us in totality, because they're classified systems. That's one of the key issues here.
So we're not getting any disclosure. You're saying, at least at this part of the interview, that we're getting a bunch of mumbo jumbo, that there's no source identifier which comes out and says disclosure. Yes, this is without a doubt some sort of alien artifact or alien craft. It's just giving us more information of generalities. Is that what I'm basically hearing so far?
Actually, this is one of the first times where they've given some specifics and declassified what the sensors were actually detecting. So the videos are fascinating, and I invite the audience to go look at the site if they need to get it. You just type in pursue.gov, I believe. They can see these videos, and they can see the motion of these objects. And one of them that we're going to go through, I don't want to steal the thunder because it's going to come up in a moment here, is from United States Central Command, the command that's working the Iran Epic Fury conflict right now. Mm-hmm. So as we go on, are there any cases that stand out? Yes, but there is no single smoking gun. Everyone is looking. If you probably have heard in the discussions that have been going on in all of television and podcasts, where is this reverse engineering program for alien technology? Where are the biologics? These species, these alien species. That's not in here. Do they talk about recovered craft? No, none of that's in here. So
not yet, right? Not yet.
Not yet. That's a very good point, Dr. Sky. Not yet.
Okay.
And we're waiting on that. And there's supposed to be some 49 or 46 videos that Representative Luna from Congress has been following very closely because she's had classified briefings on them, and they're actually going to provide unclassified renditions of these very soon. That's what they're promising. So here's what we have. Where the most compelling material that comes up is in multi-sensor military encounters. And this is fascinating because these are trained observers in the military that are using a combination of radar, electro-optical, infrared sensors. They're correlating that, and they've been involved in restricted airspace incidents at their very classified bases in some cases out west. The Apollo material, I'll talk about that, is historically interesting. I'll tell you a little tidbit on that I briefed on a couple of years ago. They came up here. The interesting thing about the Apollo detections, people say, well, it's less evidentially strong than the modern sensor cases. Well, I would argue that in space, obviously, there are a lot of phenomena that are affecting the acquisition of signals and how you can detect these objects. Because and I'll go through some of those. But the Apollo missions, Apollo 11 and 12, had actual occurrences of UAP following them.
Yeah, so, and that is interesting, Doug, because we've never heard that. Now, I've met, and maybe you have, so many of these moonwalkers, and we spent time with them in pretty good detail. But I've asked this question. I never had a chance to ask Pete Conrad of Apollo 12 this, but a good friend of ours who's since passed on, like many of the Apollo astronauts, obviously Edgar Mitchell on Apollo 14, we went into that a little bit. And he, I think, this is my opinion, of any of the astronaut corps that might have been so open to these type of phenomenon, I never pursued that. I should have with him, but that's a whole nother story. But if you're just joining us on the Dr. Sky Experience, who are you listening to, ladies and gentlemen? Mr. Cupo, that is Doug Cupo, retired United States Navy captain of Naval Intelligence and a former defense intelligence officer. He spent 4 decades in his, particular area of expertise, which is signal acquisition. But even closer to home, he's the Virginia Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, key researcher and lecturer and a disclosure advocate since 2021. And if you have a question, I want to throw this question out to the audience. Have you, ladies and gentlemen, looked and pursued Pursue 1.0, the program identified as Presidential Unsealing and Reporting System for UAP Encounters, long discussion, by direct presidential order as of May 8th, 2026? Your questions come into the theater of the mind at 1-800-848-9222. Please continue, Doug. It's fascinating. It's kind of a lot of stuff to talk about, but please continue on what is in this pursuit.
What we can, because you could go on this for the rest of the week. It's very it was a power-packed file release, I have to say. Quite a bit of data was put out. Some key terms here before we go on, because I'm going to use these terms in a lot of the discussion. Metadata. You hear this term metadata, and in simple terms, metadata is data about the data, but let's talk a little more about it. It's how the data was recorded. It's where and when and by what sensor and under what operational conditions. And examples would include, just like your cell phone or a sophisticated sensor pod on an aircraft, zoom level, sensor type, altitude, geographic coordinates, file history, how the file is progressing as the collection is going, and chain of custody. The next one is very important. kinematics. Kinematics is the study of motion characteristics.
Okay.
And really, this is how we explain the forces causing these impacts on these objects. And the key ones to remember here, and I will tell you, it's very interesting. When I came across this, these are exactly the ones that Dr. Avi Loeb said in a Zoom that I attended. He gave a special session to a San Diego MUFON audience that I attended. And they are speed, acceleration, trajectory, directional changes, hovering behavior. That's very interesting, that one. And maneuverability. So that's the kinematics, the movement of these craft. Geometry.
Right, and many defying the laws of physics, which lends to the whole point of saying, wait a minute, if it's not an earthly manufactured technology, where in the hell did this thing come from? But we're slowly, it's like molasses just trying to thaw out. We're not getting, well, the president, of course, I respect him. He's not just going to jump on television or any other source of media and say, you know what, there are aliens, we do have them, we have the bodies, and we're going to do this for the 250th anniversary. We're going to lie one out in a craft on the ellipse right near the White House, and you can get to see it if you call this number right now to get your ticket. That's not happening yet.
Oh, exactly. Well, when you look at this report, the next one that comes up is very important, is understanding the geometry. And going back to our geometry lessons, this is really all about what the shape of an object is, its orientation, its spatial structure. It could be circular, aerodynamic, rotating, and all that. So we need to understand that, because the observer and the sensor platform versus that object are going to have geometry considerations that will be the telltale signs of how that detection is going to occur. If it occurs successfully, they have to resolve that geometry.